Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Without Noise. This is a podcast about looking at money as a system, how it behaves, how it flows, and how it follows rules that often have very little to do with our motivation or our discipline. The goal here is simple: to remove the blame, shame, and hype that so often surrounds our finances. We don't offer tips or advice. Instead, we try to replace the usual sense of urgency with a sense of clarity by exploring the structure of money before we even think about action. Sitting with me today is Leaky Bucket, the part of the money story that shows what actually happens day to day. Not the theory, not the intention, just the quiet, persistent way money flows, leaks, and repeats its patterns, often without us noticing. Today, we want to explore a foundational question. Most people think money decisions happen when they sit down and consciously think about money, in those moments of focus and intention. But what if by the time we have those moments, the most important decisions have already been made? What if those moments are already too late? Leaky Bucket, I want to start with a feeling I think many people recognize. It's that internal monologue we have with ourselves about money. The thoughts that sound like, "I'll deal with it later," or that vague, nagging feeling where we say, "I know I should look at this." Maybe the most common one is, "I'll fix it next month." What are those moments, really?
They feel like preparation. They feel like the beginning of an action. There's a sense of responsibility in just acknowledging the problem. You think, okay, I've noticed it. That's the first step. And there's a little bit of relief in that, in the promise of future action.
Right, it feels productive almost.
Productive. But the question to ask is, while you are having that thought, what is the money itself doing? Does your salary behave differently because you promised to look at it later? Does the subscription payment pause because you've acknowledged it?
No, of course not. Nothing actually changes.
Exactly. The flow continues unchanged. The automatic transfers, the direct debits, the slow drain from recurring charges, they all proceed. That moment of internal awareness feels like action, but flow doesn't pause for awareness. The system that is already running just keeps running.
So if the decisions aren't being made in those moments of intention, where are they actually happening?
They happen in much quieter places. They happen without a calendar invite or a spreadsheet. A major decision happens, for instance, when your salary lands in your checking account and you do nothing. You just leave it there. That inaction is a decision. It decides that money will be used for whatever the default path is, usually daily spending and automatic bills.
That's interesting. So the absence of an action is the decision.
It is. Another decision is the $9 a month streaming service that you signed up for 2 years ago and forgot about. The decision isn't made each month when the bill is paid. The decision was made the moment you didn't cancel it. It's a decision of continuation. We focus on active spending, but the vast majority of money movement is passive continuation. Bills paid automatically from the same account, subscriptions rolling over. We only tend to notice the cumulative effect of these things when the balance feels low, and by then, the money is already gone. The decision wasn't to spend, it was to let things keep happening the same way they happened yesterday.
So we are constantly making decisions then by simply not intervening. The default state is continue as before, and that continuation is itself the choice that dictates almost everything. That's the essence of it. Why then does it so often feel like a personal failure? When we finally do look at our bank statement or when a payment is declined, the feeling isn't neutral, it's stressful. It feels like we did something wrong in that moment.
Because the stress appears long after the erosion has happened. Imagine a tiny, slow leak in a pipe behind a wall. You don't feel stress about the drip you can't see. You feel stressed when you see the water stain on the floor. But the stain isn't the problem. It's just the evidence of the problem that's been going on for a long time. People confuse the late awareness, the moment they see the stain, with the bad behavior.
That's a powerful way to put it. So feeling behind doesn't mean you made a string of bad decisions today or yesterday. It often just means you noticed late. The gap between the event and the awareness is where the feeling of failure comes from.
Right. The system kept executing its instructions quietly, and you just arrived at the scene. Your arrival doesn't make you responsible for what already happened, only for what you do next. But we tend to absorb all the past history as a reflection of our current character.
Could you expand on this idea of letting things happen? You seem to be drawing a line between taking an action and something else.
I'd call it the difference between action and allowance. An action is setting up the direct deposit, it's signing up for the service, it's taking out the loan. Those are discrete moments in time. An allowance is the decision made every day through inaction to let that system continue to run as designed. We give these systems our permission to continue simply by not revoking it.
So, most of our financial life is governed by these allowances.
Almost all of it. The effort is in setting up or changing the system. The rest is just flow. Because of this, most outcomes aren't caused by what we actively do on a given Tuesday. They're caused by what we allow to keep happening, quietly, in the background. The real decisions are the ones we're not even aware we're making.
So, if our financial lives are governed by these quiet allowances, it suggests that the moments we typically think of as managing our money, like sitting down to budget, are not the main event. They are perhaps just occasional check-ins on a system that is otherwise running on autopilot.
That's a good way to frame it. The budgeting session is like a ship captain looking at the map. That's a useful, important activity. But the ship has been moving the whole time, carried by the currents. The real work isn't just looking at the map, it's understanding the currents that are moving the ship even when you're asleep. Those currents are the allowances we've been discussing.
Let's dig deeper into that idea of allowance. It sounds passive, but it feels charged with emotion. Is it just about forgetfulness, or is there a psychology at play that makes us actively avoid looking at these systems we've set in motion?
It's rarely simple forgetfulness, because that frames it as a neutral cognitive lapse, like misplacing one's keys. The reality is often more emotionally complex. It is an active, if subconscious, avoidance. Think about it. Our financial statements, our budgets, the balances in our accounts, they are not merely collections of numbers. They are quantitative records of our lives. They reflect our priorities, not as we state them, but as they actually are. They show our habits, our impulses, our fears, and our aspirations. To open that document is to face a very honest and unfiltered story about ourselves. And for many people, there's a deep-seated fear of what that story might reveal. A fear of judgment, even if only from ourselves. A fear of confronting past mistakes, or acknowledging that our reality doesn't align with our desired identity. So the allowance becomes a defense mechanism. By not looking, by letting the system run on its own, we protect ourselves from that emotional confrontation. It is the quiet, implicit hope that if we don't look at the problem, it might not be as bad as we fear, or perhaps it will somehow resolve itself. It is a choice for short-term emotional comfort at the cost of long-term clarity and control.
That's a profound insight. The idea of financial statements as an unfiltered story of our lives is both powerful and intimidating. It explains so much about the resistance to engage. So if this allowance is the default mode, what does the alternative look like? How does one move from this passive, protective state of allowance to a more active, engaged relationship with their financial system without triggering the very shame and fear they are trying to avoid?
The transition begins by changing the question. The default question that triggers fear is, what should I be doing differently? It's a question loaded with self-criticism. The alternative is a much gentler, more neutral question. Where is it going? Not where did I spend it, but where is it going? This phrasing is intentional. It externalizes the flow of money, turning it into a phenomenon to be observed, like a biologist studying a river. You are not judging the river, you are simply mapping its course. The first step is to create a map without any intention of changing the river's path. This is crucial. You must give yourself permission to just look without the pressure of immediate action. The goal is observation, not intervention. This might mean simply looking at your bank statement once a week, not to make decisions, but just to notice the names of the places where money goes. The goal is to build a muscle of neutral observation. For a while, that is the only goal, to see the system as it is, without yet trying to change it.
This practice of neutral observation is in itself an intervention. It interrupts a cycle of avoidance. It demystifies the numbers, turning them from a source of anxiety into a source of information. And over time, this simple, repeated act of looking built a new kind of awareness. You start to see the patterns. You notice the small, recurring expenses that add up. You see the subscriptions you'd forgotten about. And you see it all without the immediate pressure to fix it. The insight comes first, and it comes from a place of calm observation. Only then, once the map is clear, can you begin to think about gently redirecting the river, not by damming it up with restrictive budgets, but by making small, intentional changes to its course based on what you've learned.
Let's linger on that for a moment, because it's a critical point. This initial phase of neutral observation, this mapping of the river, is often the hardest step for people to take, precisely because it feels like not doing anything. Our culture, especially around finance, is obsessed with action, with 5 easy steps, with immediate solutions. The idea of passive observation is counterintuitive. It can feel like you're failing before you've even started. But what if we reframe it? What if this observation isn't passive at all? What if it's the most active thing you can do? Because it's the act of gathering intelligence before you go into battle. You wouldn't send an army into a new territory without a map. Why would you do that with your own finances?
As we close, it seems the central idea today is that our most powerful money decisions often happen without any drama. They are the quiet choices of continuation, of allowance. Money moves continuously, following the paths we've already laid down for it, whether we are paying attention or not. And the effort, the stress, the intention to do something, that usually arrives long after the outcomes have already been determined by the existing structure. It's not about being better or trying harder. It's about seeing the system that is already in motion. That's the work, to see what is before we rush to change it, because what we allow to continue in silence is what shapes our lives. That reframing is incredibly useful, from a passive failure to an active gathering of intelligence. So let's make this tangible. For someone listening right now who feels that resistance, what is the single, smallest, most manageable step they could take, not tomorrow, but today, to begin mapping their own territory? Thank you for listening all the way to the end of our conversation. If you found this reflection useful and stayed with us, we'd appreciate knowing you were here. Just take a moment to comment with the single word quiet wherever you're listening. We also welcome your own questions, your feedback, and any suggestions for future episodes you'd like us to explore in this calm, systematic way. Next time, we'll talk about defaults and why they're the most powerful and often invisible force shaping our financial lives. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. We look forward to having you with us again.